The jury foreman did not wait for the clerk to finish the question. He interrupted with 2 words: "Not guilty." Applause burst through the courtroom. Lizzie Borden dropped into her seat, and one of the most closely watched murder trials in American history was over. But inside the narrow house at 92 2nd Street, 2 people had been killed in daylight. No murder weapon had been proved, no blood-stained clothing had been found, and no other person would ever be tried. The verdict settled what the law could do to Lizzie. It did not settle what happened to Andrew and Abby Borden. The 2 questions separated in that courtroom, and the gap between them never closed. Popular memory reduced the case to a rhyme about 40 whacks and an axe, though almost every part of that rhyme is wrong. Abby was Lizzie's stepmother, not her mother. The weapon was believed to be a hatchet, smaller than a full axe. The number of blows was far lower than 40. Yet the childish verse outlived the testimony because it offered something the evidence never did: a clean answer. The real case is less tidy. It turns on a house built like a divided family, a missing note, a locked front door, a trip to a hot barn, a dress burned 3 days after the murders, and a courtroom where some of the prosecution's most damaging evidence never reached the jury. On Thursday, August 4, 1892, Andrew Jackson Borden was 69 years old. He had made a substantial fortune through property, banking, and business in Fall River, Massachusetts. He was wealthy enough to live in the fashionable neighborhood known as The Hill, but he remained at 92 2nd Street, close to mills, shops, traffic, and the growing immigrant districts of the city. The house was comfortable, but its old 2-family design split the household into separate zones. Lizzie's bedroom connected to Emma's, while doors leading toward Andrew and Abby's room were kept locked. The guest room occupied the front of the 2nd floor. Below it, the sitting room where Andrew would die sat almost directly beneath Lizzie's room. Anyone moving through the house had to negotiate a small number of doors and stairways, several of them secured from inside. Those locks narrowed every theory of the crime. An intruder had to enter, move through this compartmentalized house, kill twice with a long interval between the attacks, avoid Bridget Sullivan, avoid Lizzie, leave no clear trail, and disappear without being seen on a busy street. If the killer was already inside, the same locks restricted where that person could hide. The Borden household on that morning was small. Andrew lived there with his second wife, Abby Durfee Borden, 64. His older daughter, Emma, was away in Fairhaven. His younger daughter, Lizzie, was 32 and unmarried. Bridget Sullivan, an Irish immigrant in her mid-20s, had worked as the family's live-in servant for nearly 3 years. The Bordens called her Maggie, although her name was Bridget. A 5th person had slept in the house the night before. John Vinicum Morse, the brother of Andrew's first wife and uncle to Emma and Lizzie, arrived on August 3. He stayed in the guest room, the room where Abby would be found the next morning. There was already unease in the house. 2 nights before the murders, Andrew and Abby had suffered severe stomach illness. Lizzie also reported feeling unwell, though Bridget did not. Abby visited the family physician, Dr. Seabury Bowen, and expressed concern that someone might have poisoned them. Spoiled food may have been the cause. The family had eaten leftover mutton during hot weather, and later accounts have often treated that as the likely explanation. But on the day before the murders, another event gave the illness a darker meaning. A clerk at a Fall River drugstore said Lizzie Borden entered and asked to buy 10 cents worth of prussic acid. It was a powerful poison. According to the clerk, she said she wanted it to clean a sealskin cape. He refused to sell it without a prescription. Lizzie denied making the request. The alleged purchase attempt would become one of the most suspicious facts outside the murder house. It would also become one of the facts the trial jury was not allowed to consider. That Wednesday evening, Lizzie visited her friend Alice Russell. The conversation was remembered because it seemed ordinary at first, then changed direction. Lizzie spoke about a planned visit to friends in Marion. She also said she felt depressed, as though something were hanging over her. She spoke of her father's business troubles and of fear that someone might harm him. The precise wording came through testimony given after the murders, not from a recording. The warning was remembered because Andrew Borden was killed only hours later. The next morning began early. Bridget came downstairs shortly after 6. Abby followed. Andrew went into the yard, emptied a slop pail, and unlocked the barn. Breakfast was served a little after 7. Andrew, Abby, John Morse, and Bridget were present. Lizzie came down later. Morse left the house at about 8:48. He said he was going to visit relatives and would return for the midday meal. Andrew remained for a short time, then left for his usual morning business rounds sometime after 9. That left 3 people on the property: Abby, Lizzie, and Bridget. Abby told Bridget to wash the windows, inside and out. Bridget had been sick to her stomach that morning. She went into the yard, vomited, returned, finished the dishes, and began gathering a pail, brush, dipper, and ladder. The task moved her repeatedly between the yard, barn, cellar, kitchen, dining room, and sitting room. At some point after Andrew left, Abby went upstairs to the guest room to make the bed used by John Morse. She was carrying out a common household task in a room that faced 2nd Street. Before anyone in the household understood that something was wrong, Abby was attacked in that room. The medical evidence showed that Abby died well before Andrew. Estimates varied, and 19th century methods could not produce an exact minute. Her body was colder and more rigid when examined. The blood around her had coagulated and largely dried, while Andrew's wounds were still fresh. The contents of their digestive systems also supported an earlier death for Abby. The attack appears to have begun while she was standing near the bed. One blow struck the side of her head above the ear. She fell face down between the bed and the dressing table. The killer then delivered repeated hatchet blows to the back and top of her head. Accounts differ slightly in how they count wounds and blows, but the medical testimony described roughly 18 or 19 strikes. There was no prolonged struggle through the room and no trail of overturned furnishings, suggesting a chase. Abby fell in the narrow space between the bed and dressing table and remained there. From the hallway, the bed concealed most of her body. A person could climb toward the 2nd floor without immediately seeing her, while someone looking low beneath the bed could catch a partial view before entering the room. While Abby lay upstairs, Bridget continued washing windows outside. She saw no stranger enter and heard no scream. She did not know that one member of the household was already dead. Lizzie's movements during this period were never reconstructed with confidence. She said she had been downstairs and had spoken with Abby earlier. She later gave answers that shifted over whether she had gone upstairs, when she had last seen her stepmother, and what she had been doing in different rooms. Some of those contradictions came during a closed inquest after she had been given morphine by Dr. Bowen. The drug may have affected her clarity. It does not explain every inconsistency, but it is part of the record. Between Andrew's departure and return, Abby was killed in the guest room. Bridget was moving through her chores. Lizzie's exact location could not be fixed, and no other person was known to be on the property. Andrew returned at about 10:40. The front door was not easy to open. It had a spring lock, a key lock, and a bolt. Bridget heard him trying to get in and came from the kitchen to help. As she struggled with the fastenings, she muttered in frustration. Then, according to her trial testimony, she heard Lizzie laugh upstairs, either in the hall or near the top of the stairs. If Bridget heard correctly, Lizzie was upstairs within steps of the guest room where Abby's body lay. The door was open, yet Lizzie gave no alarm and said nothing about seeing her stepmother. The defense could answer that the bed concealed most of the body and that a person could pass without noticing it. Even so, Bridget's testimony placed Lizzie in the part of the house closest to the first murder. Andrew came in and went upstairs briefly, then returned to the sitting room. Lizzie was ironing handkerchiefs. She told Bridget that Abby had received a note saying a friend was ill and had gone out. No one ever produced that note. Bridget had not seen anyone deliver it. No sick friend was identified. Abby's body was already upstairs. The story of the note explained Abby's absence without sending anyone upstairs. If Andrew asked where his wife was, an ill friend supplied an ordinary reason for her to be away and delayed any search of the guest room. Whether the note ever existed is unknown. Lizzie maintained that it did, but no other witness confirmed it. Andrew settled on the sitting room sofa. He had been out walking in the August heat and appeared ready to rest. Bridget finished her work and went to her attic room. She later estimated that she lay down around the time the city clock struck 11. Lizzie said she left the house and went to the barn. Her explanation was that she wanted a piece of lead to use as a sinker for a fishing trip. She climbed into the loft, looked through boxes, moved boards, and ate pears that had fallen from a tree. The barn was one of the hottest places on the property. Investigators later questioned why she would remain there for 15 or 20 minutes on such a morning. They also examined the dusty loft. Some officers believed the dust did not show the disturbance expected from a long search. Others were less certain. A defense witness testified that he saw a woman he believed was Lizzie coming from the direction of the barn shortly after 11. The barn trip was possible, and the outside sighting gave Lizzie some support. But the longer search through the loft came mainly from her own account. It placed her away from the sitting room during the most likely time of Andrew's death without explaining Abby's murder, the missing note, or why no stranger was seen. Sometime close to 11, Andrew Borden was attacked while lying on the sofa. The killer stood near the head of the couch, between the sofa and the parlor doorway. Blood patterns were found on the wall, a picture frame, the door, and the jamb. The medical examiner counted 10 blows, though some later summaries say 10 or 11. The wounds were concentrated on the side of Andrew's head and face. The attack was immediately fatal. There is no evidence that he rose or fought back. His position suggested he may have been asleep or resting when the first blow landed. Within minutes, Lizzie called up the back stairs. "Maggie, come down!" Bridget asked what was wrong. "Come down quick. Father's dead. Somebody came in and killed him." Bridget found Lizzie near the back screen door. Lizzie did not tell her to enter the sitting room. She sent her across the street for Dr. Bowen. He was not home. Bridget then went to summon Alice Russell. Neighbor Adelaide Churchill came after noticing activity and hearing that something had happened. In the first confused conversations, Lizzie said she had been in the barn. In one account, she said she heard a groan or distress sound. In another, she described returning and finding the sitting room door open. She repeated that Abby had gone out after receiving the note, then said she thought she had heard Abby return. At first, attention centered on Andrew. Abby was treated as missing, not dead. That delay protected the secret upstairs for only a short time. Lizzie asked that someone look for Mrs. Borden. Bridget did not want to go alone. She and Adelaide Churchill climbed the front staircase together. Churchill raised her eyes just high enough to look beneath the bed in the open guest room doorway. She saw a form on the floor. Bridget went farther and recognized Abby. Churchill hurried down in shock. Her words were remembered in slightly different forms, but the meaning was clear. There was another victim. Abby had been killed too. The house immediately became a crime scene, but not one managed by modern standards. Neighbors, doctors, officers, undertakers, relatives, and reporters moved through or around the property. Doors were opened, rooms entered, and objects handled. The bodies were examined, where they lay, and photographed before removal. But the preservation of trace evidence was limited by the methods of 1892 and by the speed with which people gathered. No one found a stranger hiding inside. Police examined the cellar and collected axes and hatchets. One item drew particular attention: a hatchet head with its handle broken off near the blade. Dust or ash on it became the subject of argument. The prosecution suggested the handle might have been removed, and the head covered to disguise recent use. The defense pointed to rust, uncertainty about when it was found, contradictions in police handling, and the absence of blood that could connect it to the murders. The dimensions of its cutting edge were broadly consistent with some wounds, but the match was too general to identify it as the murder weapon. Even the prosecution stopped short of claiming that it had proved the hatchet head was used. A hatchet used in two close-range attacks would be expected to carry blood, hair, or tissue. None was conclusively recovered from the suspected blade, and no missing handle was reliably matched to it. The actual weapon may have left the house, been hidden more effectively, been cleaned beyond the methods available at the time, or gone unrecognized among the tools. Police also looked for bloody clothing. Witnesses who saw Lizzie shortly after the discovery did not observe blood on her face, hands, or dress. Alice Russell said her hair did not appear disordered. A dress later turned over to police had only a minute spot on a skirt, too little and too uncertain to establish anything. The lack of visible blood became the prosecution's hardest physical problem. A change of clothing could explain it, but no witness saw Lizzie change before the alarm, and no blood-stained garment was recovered. If she killed Andrew shortly before 11, only a few minutes remained to hide or clean the weapon, deal with stained clothing, restore her appearance, and call Bridget. Preparation might have made that possible, but the house yielded no physical proof that it happened. The first day also exposed tensions within the family. Andrew's wealth had not created an easy household. Years earlier, he transferred property to a relative of Abby. Emma and Lizzie believed that if their father benefited their stepmother's family, they should receive something comparable. Andrew gave them a rental property connected to their mother's family. Shortly before the murders, the sisters sold it back to him for $5,000. The dispute was more than an isolated financial transaction. Lizzie had stopped calling Abby mother and referred to her as Mrs. Borden. The daughters often ate separately from Andrew and Abby. Locked doors divided the bedrooms. There is evidence of distance and resentment, though witnesses differed on how hostile the relationships truly were. Inheritance created a possible motive, but it was not as simple as later retellings sometimes claim. Had Abby outlived Andrew, she could have inherited from him, and her own relatives might eventually have benefited. Instead, Abby died first, so her property passed to Andrew. After his death, his estate passed to Emma and Lizzie. Andrew had no known will, and the family's arrangements were complicated, so inheritance alone could not establish motive. The order of the deaths nevertheless changed where the money went. Investigators also returned to the alleged poison purchase. A woman identified as Lizzie had tried to buy prussic acid the day before the killings, raising the possibility that the household illness involved more than spoiled food. Chemical examinations did not establish that Andrew and Abby had been poisoned. They were killed by a sharp, heavy instrument, and the prosecution could not connect the requested acid directly to the method used. Lizzie's statements created more suspicion. At the inquest held from August 9 through August 11, she was questioned at length without her defense lawyer beside her. Her answers wandered across the morning. At different points, she struggled to say whether she had been upstairs or downstairs, what dress she wore when she last saw Abby, and how long she spent in the barn. She insisted the note had existed, but could not produce it. She said she searched for lead sinkers in 8 pairs. She denied trying to buy prussic acid. Grief, days of suspicion, morphine, and repetitive questioning gave the defense several explanations for Lizzie's confusion. The disputed answers still reached the central timeline: which room she occupied when she last saw Abby, and where she was during the intervals surrounding both killings. At the end of the inquest, she was arrested. Public reaction split quickly. One side saw the obvious suspect, an adult daughter at home, with family resentment, financial benefit, changing statements, and an implausible barn errand. The other saw a respectable church-going woman being forced into a role that late Victorian America could barely imagine. Lizzie taught Sunday school and belonged to religious and charitable organizations. Many supporters believed a woman of her class and background was physically and morally incapable of such violence, and that belief followed the evidence into court. Fall River itself was divided by class, religion, ethnicity, and politics. Andrew Borden belonged to an established Yankee family. Bridget Sullivan was Irish. The police force included Irish officers, whose authority challenged older social hierarchies. Newspapers took sides, sometimes along the same lines. Reports became mixed with rumor: secret lovers, hidden enemies, illegitimate children, hired killers, families' conspiracies, and mysterious strangers. Some theories began in genuine investigative questions. Others reflected prejudice or sold newspapers. Within hours of the murders, police arrested a Portuguese immigrant named Antonio Ariel in a saloon. He protested his innocence, and a local clerk recognized him and supported his account. Ariel was released almost immediately. No evidence placed him inside the Borden house. On Sunday, August 7, Alice Russell entered the kitchen and saw Lizzie at the stove holding part of a light blue cotton dress. Emma was nearby. According to Russell, Emma asked what Lizzie was doing. Lizzie replied that she was going to burn the old dress because it was covered with paint. Russell saw the skirt go into the fire and later saw Lizzie tearing another portion. She did not see blood on it. Emma later supported the explanation that the dress had been badly soiled with paint and was no longer useful. Other witnesses said they had previously seen paint on it. An old dress stained with paint might ordinarily have gone into the stove without notice. 3 days after 2 murders, while police were searching for bloody clothing, the timing made the same act deeply suspicious. By Saturday evening, Lizzie had been told that she was under suspicion. The next morning, she destroyed clothing. Alice Russell later told her it was the worst thing she could have done. Lizzie answered, in substance, by asking why Alice had allowed her to do it. Unlike the disputed hatchet head, the dress concerned an action by Lizzie after she knew police suspected her. The paint explanation could be true, but the cloth itself was gone. All that remained was testimony about its color, condition, and destruction. A grand jury indicted Lizzie in December 1892. She remained jailed for months while her defense prepared. The trial opened in New Bedford on June 5, 1893. From the first days, it turned on what the jury would be permitted to hear: how a woman accused of patricide would be presented, and whether a chain of circumstantial facts could carry the weight of a possible death sentence. The Commonwealth was represented by Hosea Knowlton and William Moody. Lizzie's defense included Andrew Jennings and George Robinson, a former governor of Massachusetts. Robinson had appointed one of the judges now sitting on the 3-judge panel, a connection noted at the time and ever since. There is no proof that the appointment controlled the result, but the defense had money, status, and exceptional legal skill. From the beginning, the Commonwealth could place Lizzie at the property, show opportunity, point to friction over Abby and money, and attack the Barnes story, the missing note, the changing answers, and the burned dress. It could not put before the jury a confirmed weapon, bloody clothing, an eyewitness, a confession, a fingerprint, or any scientific test linking her to either attack. Fingerprints were beginning to enter criminal investigation elsewhere, but they were not used here. Blood typing and DNA testing were unavailable. Investigators had to rely on time, testimony, observed behavior, and inference. Bridget Sullivan became one of the most important witnesses because she was the only other known person at the house during both murder windows. She described washing the windows, Andrew's return, the locked front door, Lizzie's laugh upstairs, Andrew resting in the sitting room, her own retreat to the attic, and Lizzie's call that he was dead. Bridget placed Lizzie inside the house near Abby's body, and later near Andrew. She also said she saw no blood on Lizzie and had witnessed no open conflict that morning. She heard no attack and could identify neither a weapon nor a killer. The front door became central to both sides. The prosecution argued that the house was so tightly secured that an outsider was unlikely. The defense answered that unlikely was not impossible. The back screen door was used during the morning. Bridget moved in and out. Andrew himself returned from the street. Tradesmen, messengers, and visitors were normal in that neighborhood. A stranger could have entered through an unsecured moment or hidden inside. But the outsider theory carried a severe burden. After killing Abby, the person would have had to remain in or near the house for more than an hour, while Bridget moved through rooms and around the yard. Then the killer would have attacked Andrew, escaped without being seen, and taken the weapon and bloody clothing, or avoided leaving them. No stranger was identified through reliable testimony. John Morse was examined because he slept in the murder room the night before and returned to the house soon after the bodies were found. His visit involved business, and later speculation connected that business to property. His alibi, however, was unusually detailed and supported. He had traveled away from the house, visited relatives, and was seen by others during the critical period. Suspicion remained in popular theory because of timing and family money, not because investigators found physical evidence against him. Bridget has also been named in later theories. She had opportunity during parts of the morning, and the class prejudice of the era worked both against her and, at times, against the police who relied on her. But no credible motive was established. Her movements were partly observed. Nothing tied her to the weapon or clothing. Later stories that she confessed or protected Lizzie have never been supported by reliable documentation. Emma was 15 miles away. Theories involving her require an accomplice, a secret return, or prior planning. None has been proved. Her later estrangement from Lizzie is real, but it happened years after the trial and does not turn her into a participant. None of the alternative theories acquired a physical link to the murders. Morse had a strong alibi, Bridget lacked a documented motive, Emma was away, and no unknown intruder was identified. Lizzie remained the person around whom the greatest number of circumstances gathered, although none of them became direct proof. Two rulings then removed evidence that might have changed the prosecution's chances. Lizzie's inquest testimony was excluded. The legal argument concerned whether her statements were voluntary when she had effectively become the target of an official inquiry and was required to answer without counsel present. The ruling meant the jury did not hear the full sequence of contradictory answers that had helped lead to her arrest. The judges also excluded the drugstore testimony about prussic acid. The prosecution could not connect the poison request directly to deaths caused by hatchet blows, and the court found the proposed evidence too remote or insufficiently tied to the charged murders. The jury would therefore hear neither Lizzie's inquest contradictions nor the alleged attempt to buy poison. The burned dress did reach the jury. Alice Russell described what she saw. The defense countered with testimony that the dress was stained with paint and had been known as an old garment. No one could examine the destroyed cloth for blood. The act was suspicious, but its meaning depended entirely on what the jury believed Lizzie was destroying. Medical experts described the wounds and demonstrated the likely positions of the assailant. The prosecution argued that a woman of ordinary strength could have delivered them. The defense did not need to prove that she could not. It needed only to show that the Commonwealth could not prove she did. At one point, the victims' skulls were brought into court as exhibits, and Lizzie fainted. No record can establish whether the reaction was spontaneous, physical, strategic, or some combination. Before the jury, however, the prosecution's display of violent force also placed a restrained, black-clad defendant beside the remains of her father and stepmother. The prosecution had to persuade 12 men that Lizzie possessed the strength, nerve, and planning to commit 2 attacks and conceal the evidence. Her defense drew on the era's image of a respectable woman as delicate, dependent, and morally incapable of patricide. That cultural image made conviction harder before the circumstantial evidence was even measured. Lizzie also entered court with resources unavailable to most defendants. She had a prominent name, an exceptional legal team, church supporters, and money to sustain a long defense. Newspapers friendly to her described dignity and refinement. Hostile papers saw coldness and calculation. The same silence became self-control in one column and lack of grief in another. The prosecution's closing argument assembled the circumstances into one chain. Abby was killed while Lizzie was home. Bridget heard her upstairs, and the missing note explained why Abby appeared to be away. After Andrew returned and Bridget went to the attic, Lizzie remained downstairs with him. The chain continued through the barn story, the changing details, and the dress burned after suspicion had settled on her. No outsider was seen, and no one else combined the same access, motive, and opportunity. The defense attacked that chain one link at a time. Family disagreement and presence in the house were not proof of murder. A laugh on the stairs did not show that Lizzie had seen the body behind the bed. The note might simply have been discarded, and a witness placed a woman near the barn. Police had failed to secure the house. The hatchet head was never identified as the weapon. The burnt dress had been seen with paint, and witnesses found no blood on Lizzie. Without an eyewitness, the government was asking the jury to bridge each physical gap with suspicion. Then came the judge's instructions. Justice Justin Dewey's charge emphasized the presumption of innocence, the absence of direct evidence, and the danger of conviction on an incomplete chain. Contemporary critics considered parts of it unusually favorable to the defense. Whatever the reason, it gave the jurors a clear legal route to acquittal. On June 20, the 12 men retired. Later, accounts say they reached their decision quickly and waited so the verdict would not appear hasty. The official transcript records the return to court after little more than an hour. The clerk began the formal question. The foreman interrupted. Not guilty. Spectators applauded before officers stopped them, and Lizzie dropped into her seat. The jurors confirmed the verdict, and the court discharged her. The Commonwealth had built powerful suspicion, but had not closed the physical gaps. Lizzie did not have to identify another killer, prove the note existed, account for every minute in the barn, or solve the missing weapon. The prosecution had to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the jury said it had not. The acquittal ended the prosecution, but it did not give every remaining theory equal weight. The theory that Lizzie killed both victims remains strong because it requires the fewest unknown people. It fits the controlled access to the house, the family tension, the inheritance sequence, the missing note, the upstairs laugh, the opportunity after Bridget retired, the contradictory statements, and the burning of the dress. It also demands an efficient concealment plan for the weapon and clothing, and no direct evidence of that plan survived. Assigning Abby's death to Lizzie and Andrew's to someone else creates two offenders without proof. Bridget theories require motive and coordination that the record does not supply, while Morse theories collide with his alibi. An unknown intruder must hide for a long period and escape unseen. Stories involving secret children, romantic conspiracies, or later confessions depend largely on rumor, disputed recollection, or material created decades afterward. Lizzie Borden was never legally proved to have killed Andrew or Abby, and no later theory displaced her as the central suspect. Suspicion could not recover the missing physical steps. Who carried the weapon, where it went, or what happened to the killer's clothing, or how the long interval between the attacks was managed. After the trial, Lizzie and Emma inherited their father's estate and moved to a large house on the hill. Lizzie called it Maplecroft and began using the name Lisbeth. It was the life of comfort and social position that the Second Street house had never fully given her. Acquittal did not restore her reputation. Many people in Fall River shunned her. Children taunted her. Her church relationships changed. She traveled, attended the theater, entertained guests, and lived with money. But the murders followed her into every room. Emma left Maplecroft in 1905 after a break with her sister. The exact cause remains uncertain, though later accounts have connected it to Lizzie's social circle and a gathering involving actress Nance O'Neill. The sisters never reconciled publicly. Lizzie died in 1927. Emma died 9 days later. Both were buried in the Borden family plot with Andrew and Abby. Later investigations produced neither a confirmed weapon nor a confession that survived scrutiny, and no new defendant ever entered a courtroom. The murders remained officially unsolved. The house at 92 2nd Street became the fixed image of the case, but its meaning changed. In 1892, its locks seemed to promise that the killer's path could be reconstructed. Instead, they multiplied the possible routes. Abby could be missed behind the bed. An outsider could slip through during a brief opening and wait. Clothing could be changed. The weapon could leave the property. Each explanation remained possible enough to resist certainty and weak enough to resist proof. The jury answered the question it was legally required to answer. The Commonwealth had not proved Lizzie Borden guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The question left inside the house was different. Someone moved through those divided rooms on the morning of August 4, killed Abby in the guest room, waited or returned, killed Andrew on the sofa, and carried the final explanation away. The locks remained, the bodies were buried, and Lizzie walked free. The only answer America kept was the one invented for a rhyme.